Welcome back, everyone. Today, we're bringing you a brand new explainer. And let me tell you, this one dives deep into a truly chilling firsthand account. We're looking at a story that starts out like a completely normal, relatable evening, right? But then, it just spirals into absolute terror. We're going to break down the anatomy of this haunting experience, treating it almost like a psychological case study based on the details we have from the original source material. So get ready, because the events surrounding Eden House School are for sure going to keep you on the edge of your seat. Okay, let's dive into this. Have you ever felt someone watching you in the dark? Seriously, put yourself in those shoes for a second. Imagine the visceral fear of being totally alone at night, walking down a street that you know like the back of your hand. But suddenly, every single shadow feels like a real threat. This is the exact psychological state our narrator finds themselves in, and it really is the perfect entry point for us to understand the mechanics of this terrifying account. It all begins with a setup that, let's be honest, we can all probably relate to: the false security of late-night studying. The narrator was cramming for their final exams, and since the exams were right around the corner, their school had graciously extended the library hours to 11 p.m. Because the narrator lived right nearby, they figured the quiet, focused environment of the school library was way better than trying to study at home. It seemed like a perfectly safe, totally responsible plan. But then, the creeping sense of isolation built up slowly. Just look at the timeline. Arriving at 6 p.m.? Totally normal. Usually, by 8 p.m., you've still got a few students lingering around. But by 10 p.m., total dead silence. The narrator was completely alone. They only had about 10 or 15 minutes of work left to knock out when, suddenly, that dead silence was broken. They heard strange, eerie footsteps pacing just outside the library doors. Packing up in an absolute panic, the narrator bolted out of the library and into the school's long corridor, making a beeline for the main doors. But right at the very end of that hallway, they saw it: the silhouette of a woman. As the narrator walked toward her, they reported feeling this sudden, incredibly heavy, overwhelming discomfort. The fear was so intense, they actually called out into the hallway, literally asking, "Who is there?" And guys, within seconds of asking that question, the figure simply vanished into thin air. And this brilliantly illustrates the massive shift in the atmosphere. Relieved that the hallway was clear, they finally made it outside. But things were entirely different now. Usually, the street was super safe and bustling, even late at night. Now, it was this terrifying, unnatural void where there should have been the comforting presence of a neighborhood. You have to remember, the narrator is exhausted, hungry, and entirely alone on this deadly silent street. At this point, the panic is fully setting in. The narrator is power walking with their head down, staring intently at the ground, just wanting to get home as quickly as humanly possible. But as they're rushing along the empty road, something catches their eye. Despite knowing for a fact there was absolutely no one behind them just a moment ago, they suddenly see an unnatural growing shadow creeping up on the pavement ahead of them. Looking up, they saw her, and the details here are incredibly unsettling. She was wearing these dirty, unkempt clothes, and her body, it appeared physically broken. Her arms and legs were twisted and bent at these horrible, unnatural angles, her hair completely scattered and wild. And because she was limping so painfully slowly, the narrator accidentally walked right up to her, getting a terrifyingly clear look at this figure in the dark. So what's really crucial to understand here is how the human body reacts to this level of absolute terror. The narrator's gut instinct was screaming at them, "Do not get any closer, and definitely do not try to cross past her." This triggered your textbook freeze response. First, their body completely froze in place. Second, their mind went totally numb, like they couldn't even force themselves to speak. And finally, running purely on sheer silent panic, the narrator simply raised a finger and desperately pointed away, silently begging this woman to just leave. And incredibly, she listened. The woman with the twisted limbs slowly turned and began limping away, heading exactly in the direction the narrator had pointed. She walked off into the blackness, getting further and further away until she entirely disappeared into the dark night. But the narrator knew they weren't safe yet, not even close. The panic was still rising. They started walking as fast as humanly possible toward their house, their footsteps just echoing urgently all over the empty road. Their mind was racing, desperately hoping that a car would drive by or another person would just magically appear on the street. Anyone they could ask for help. Just anyone to break that terrifying isolation. And then, right in that very moment of desperate hope, the silence was violently shattered. From deep within the darkness,
Right where the woman had vanished, the narrator heard it. A distant, echoing, blood-curdling scream.
That sound was the absolute breaking point. The sheer, overwhelming terror caused the narrator's mind to experience a total shutdown. Their brain simply couldn't process the fear for one more second, resulting in a total blackout. They collapsed, falling completely unconscious right there in the middle of the road. Well, thankfully, the story doesn't end on that cold street. The narrator eventually regained consciousness in the safety of their home after being rescued by a neighbor. But it was exactly in that safety that the neighbor revealed a horrifying piece of local history, a history that explained exactly what had happened that night.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the timeline. To understand the sheer terror of that night, the neighbor explained we have to go all the way back to the year 1998. That specific year serves as the tragic origin point for the shadowy figure haunting the roads around Eden House School.
The neighbor told the story of a woman named Agatha. She was 32, she lived right nearby, and she was a mother who deeply, deeply loved her daughter. It is absolutely vital to understand this part of the lore, because the horror we just talked about, it actually stems from a very human, very real place of maternal love.
Agatha's daughter was just 9 years old, a devastatingly young age. And here is the crucial connection that ties this whole terrifying ordeal together. That 9-year-old girl was a student at the exact same school our narrator was studying at that very night.
The story takes a heartbreaking turn here. One day, while simply playing at Eden House School, the young girl was involved in a sudden, fatal accident. She passed away right there on the school grounds. The shock of losing her 9-year-old daughter so unexpectedly was just absolute agony for Agatha. She simply could not bear the grief, and she passed away soon after, entirely broken by the loss. And this brings us to the very definition of a restless spirit. It's a soul trapped in the physical realm due to severe trauma, endlessly searching for closure. The locals believe the woman with the twisted limbs is Agatha herself, a grieving mother who is utterly unable to accept her daughter's death, endlessly limping through the dark, still desperately searching for her little girl.
Which brings us to the end of today's explainer. We've traced the timeline from what should have been a simple late-night study session all the way to a chilling encounter with a restless spirit born from unthinkable grief. So I leave you with this final thought. Knowing the heartbreaking tragedy of Agatha and her endless search in the dark, would you ever dare walk alone near Eden House School at night? Thanks so much for joining me, and I'll see you next time.